The quality of Instagram videos lately have been super crazy, amazingly good. As Instagram creators, it should be our goal to either obtain that level of quality or even exceed that level of quality. So I'm gonna show you all my secrets and how I get high quality video for Instagram feed videos, IGTV videos, and yeah, even Instagram stories. To make your videos go from yo to whoa, that was super lame. Salutations everybody, Benjamin Brandon here. Welcome to another Instagram filmmaking tutorial. I'm gonna show you 6 tips to improve your Instagram videos in a matter of minutes. The tips you're gonna learn here today all refer to your camera. Whether you're shooting on a high quality DSLR or mirrorless camera, if you're shooting on your phone, well, this is probably not the video. Although if you want a video like that, hit the comments, let me know. So the vast majority of motivation that I get to make these type of videos come from the dialogue you and I have on Instagram. One thing you guys ask me a lot is how do you get your videos to look so sharp and clean and just good looking, especially when Instagram compresses them like a ton. The secret's out, let's show you. It all starts with tip number 1. Now this is gonna sound like a biased tip, but I promise you it's not. Shoot vertically. When you shoot vertically versus horizontally for Instagram content, it removes a lot of the issues you can have with shooting horizontally, such as composition, the lack of quality you get when you zoom in a horizontal video, especially if you don't shoot 4K, and even lens selection. For instance, if you take a B-roll shot that was shot with a 50mm lens, horizontally, you will automatically lose a bunch of visual information because you have to zoom that in either in a 9:16 or a 4:5 aspect ratio. Whereas vertically, you have full control of what is seen in the frame, and you can pan or tilt towards the information you want to portray within your video. While vertical filmmaking can be pretty challenging, it's actually a lot easier when you get it right to shoot high quality Instagram videos. Now when it comes to settings on your camera, that's super important. That's where you get the most bang for your buck, such as shooting 4K if you have it. And that's tip number 2. Shooting 4K, even if there is a slight crop, will just look better. It's best to give Instagram everything you possibly have when it comes to quality, because when they compress, the more you give, the more they'll be able to leave. And 4K just helps that. And one strategy that I use all the time for every IGTV video is I zoom in on certain types of elements within my frame. So when I do that in editing, it enlarges the video quite a bit to where you can get some pixelation and artifacts that you don't want within that video. Makes it look grainy, you'll see the quality loss. So when you shoot 4K, you don't have to worry about any of that. That's the reason why I personally shoot 4K. It does suck for my hard drives though. My other go-to setting in tip number 3 is shooting log if you have it. Now since I shoot on an EOS R, I use C-Log. If you have a Sony, you'll use S-Log. Apparently there's a V-Log and I use it for every vlog. Yeah. And the reason why I shoot log is because it gives you a blank canvas, let's say, where it does harness all the visual information that you're shooting and sometimes even enhances it, especially if you're outside. So when I go into editing and I color correct and add a grade on there, you get a much more dynamic image because it gives you a lot of control to manipulate what colors you bring out within that frame. So tip number 4 we're gonna spend some time on because this is where I see a lot of Instagram creators either succeeding or definitely needing improvement. Frame rates. You need to know what frame rates to use and how to use them. It's super important. And any camera pretty much has 3 frame rates. 24 frames a second or 23 point blah blah blah, 30p, and 60. Let's start with 24 frames a second. This is the frame rate that most would claim the cinematic frame rate. This is how a lot of movies can be shot on, especially dramas. And it's mainly because of the motion blur that you can see. So if you're looking to make your videos look film-like, then 24p is the way to go. I personally think it's a little overrated, as most creators swear by it. I actually don't shoot in 24p. Ben, you don't shoot in 24p? Nope. As my videos still look cinematic, they are all shot in 30p. There are 2 main reasons why I shoot everything in 30p. The first reason is kind of an old editing hack, where 30p footage can be slowed down on a 24 frame timeline by 70 to 80%, which then gives you a smoother looking shot that can sometimes get rid of a little bit of bumps you may have with the camera, or slow things down just enough to where you can draw someone in. It can also help improve your video stabilization. And by nature, because 30p looks a little bit crispier than 24p, that's why I shoot in 30p on a 24 frame timeline. So I still keep the cinematic feel editing on a 24p timeline, but 30p footage makes my images a lot more clear. Also easier to watch and less motion blur. It's not to say I never use 24p, I just use it for short films and everything else. All vlogs and all the stuff that I do like that, all 30p. Now for 60 frames a second, you need to use it pretty much only for slow motion. Otherwise you'll get this crazy looking staccato effect where everything looks super sharp to the point where it's not really viewable after a few seconds. And 60p is used for action sequences. So if you have an action sequence and you're trying to just get them kung fu moves all in frame and make it, you know, nice and easy and for everyone to see, then yeah, you can shoot that in 60p. But when I'm referring to slow motion, shooting 60 frames a second allows you to slow down your footage by 50% on a 24 frame timeline. So that's how I get all my buttery smooth vertical B-roll, is shooting 60p and dropping it into my 24 frame timeline, slowing it down by 50%, and then watching the beautiful butteriness that I've just made. Now don't get me wrong, I do also shoot in 120p, so if you do have 120p, go after that fam. But if you don't, 60 works just as good. Now everything you just learned about frame rates won't work unless you have the right shutter speed for the frame rate that you're shooting with, which leads into our next tip, which is the 180-degree shutter rule. The 180-degree rule's main purpose is to allow things to look more realistic, as if the human eye were to perceive it off of the camera. So when you watch something on your phone, if you apply the 180-degree rule, it looks realistic. It doesn't look like an animation or that crazy staccato effect. So to achieve the 180-degree rule for the highest quality you can put on Instagram, you need to do very simple math. So since I shoot everything in 30p, that is my frame rate, I need to times that by 2, which is 60, and find the shutter speed that is closely resembled to that number. So for shooting 30 frames a second, my shutter speed is 1/60th of a second. The same thing applies for 24 frames a second. When you times that by 2, yes, you do get 48, I can do math, but then you round that up, so it becomes 50. So then you'll use 1/50th of a shutter. Where this applies the most though is 60p, because let's say you shoot something in 60p, but you use 1/60th of a shutter, and then you slow it down in post, 50% like I told you you should. And I want you coming to me like, Ben, I slowed it down to 50. What? This is gross. Multiplying that by 2 gives you 120. I don't have 120 shutter speed. Round up again to 1/25th of a second, or 1/125th of a second. And the difference is absolutely evident. Slowing down something shot in 60p, but not using the right shutter speed makes things all glitchy and weird motion looking and does not look buttery smooth at all. Whereas applying the 180-degree shutter rule using 60p at 1/125th of a second, that's where you get buttery smooth B-roll that makes people go, wow, not yo. You get it? That was a recall from the beginning. Never mind. So follow the 180-degree shutter rule. The next thing I do is find what is called the lens sweet spot. The sweet spot is an old photography term that is definitely applied for DSLR and mirrorless video cameras, where you're able to find the sharpest looking image that your lens is able to offer. A lot of times what happens is we crank our aperture to the fastest setting. So for this lens here, the fastest aperture is a 4.0. That actually doesn't give me the sharpest image on this lens. To find your lens's sweet spot, you need to lower your aperture by 1 to 2 stops. Once you do that, you can tell the difference between the fastest aperture and then your sweet spot. There are some visual details that does get captured by finding your sweet spot versus cranking your aperture to the fastest setting. And this is what helps me get the most sharpest image. Now, depending on the type of lens you have, that may be hard, because using a slowish lens like a 4.0 here, I have to crank to almost about f8, which will definitely darken my image. So it does work very well if you're in well-lit situations or if you're outside, but let's say you're in a low-light scenario, that's gonna be super hard. Obviously, faster lenses like 1.8s, 1.4s, that helps a ton, because then you can crank to about 3.5 and not lose much exposure. Don't get me wrong, I don't always try to find the sweet spot because, well, sometimes I'm in the dark and I can't do that. So with whatever lens you have, I challenge you to lower your aperture a little bit and find your lens's sweet spot. And for my last secret, use ISO appropriately. Do your best to limit the amount of ISO that you use on your camera. Consider everything you learned with shutter speed and aperture as an actual physical process happening within your camera. When it comes to ISO, that is a digital process, which means it gives you essentially fake information. Aperture and shutter speed control the amount of light that goes into your camera's sensor, whereas ISO, it's essentially a visual highlighting effect where it brightens up your frame by enhancing all the visual information that your camera's already kept. So it's like putting a highlighter on something. What I do in every scenario that I'm in is I lower my ISO all the way, and then once I have my shutter speed appropriately using the 180-degree rule, and my aperture to find my sweet spot, I'll then crank the ISO just enough to where I can see what's happening, and I either can tell, cool, my subject is well exposed, or I know that I can tweak this in editing without compromising the quality of the footage. Now you know all my secrets to how I obtain high quality Instagram videos. For more Instagram filmmaking tutorials and IGTV tips and tricks videos, crush that subscribe button for me. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, DM me, let's connect, and I will see you on the next one. I'm out.